It wasn't a stranger who stole my home. It was the girl who once called me her hero. I didn't lose the ranch to a bank. I lost it to blood, the one betrayal I never saw coming. My name is Evan Carter, 38 years old. I was born on Napi, this stretch of stubborn Colorado dirt, land that baked under summer suns and froze hard under January winds, a place where your handshake mattered more than your last name, and family was supposed to mean everything. I thought I understood loyalty. I thought I understood blood. I thought wrong. I stood alone in the kitchen, sunlight slicing through the crooked blinds, turning the dust in the air into rivers of gold. The envelope lay open on the counter, its contents spread out like a crime scene. Legal documents. Neat, official, cold. My name was there. At the bottom of the page, my signature, except it wasn't mine. The E curved too tight. The C of Carter didn't have the heavy press I learned from years of filling out feed orders and loan papers. It was a perfect forgery, good enough for the bank, the court, anyone who didn't know better. I knew better. I poured a cup of black coffee with steady hands, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle in my bones. The kettle hissed behind me, long and low, like an old dog nursing a wound. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table my father had built by hand, the same one that had hosted every Sunday dinner, every Christmas morning, every talk that mattered. I ran my thumb across a gouge, in the wood where Samantha had once carved her initials with a pocket knife when she was 8 years old. "Forever family," she'd said then, laughing when Dad had pretended to scold her. Forever. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. Beyond the cracked glass, the field stretched wide and empty, the grass rippling under a lazy late afternoon breeze. Land my grandfather bled for, land my father built dreams on, land Samantha now owned, on paper, if not in soul. Somewhere in town, she was probably celebrating, smiling her pretty smile, toasting with people who didn't know or didn't care what it cost to steal a man's birthright. I didn't throw the coffee mug across the room. I didn't slam the table. I didn't curse the walls or pound my fists until my knuckles bled. I just sat there breathing, letting the betrayal wrap around me like an old, familiar coat, because deep down I understood something few people are willing to admit. Family doesn't always stab you in the back. Sometimes they smile while they twist the knife in your chest. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the bitterness. This land wasn't just property. It was legacy. It was blood and sweat and broken bones, and now it was a battleground. I looked back down at the papers, at the neat rows of lies, at the signature that pretended to be mine, and I made a quiet promise to myself. I might have lost a piece of paper today, but I hadn't lost the fight. Not yet. Not by a long shot. I didn't storm out. I didn't drive into town to pound on Samantha's door, demanding answers she'd already decided I didn't deserve. Instead, I stood up from the table slowly, the chair legs scraping across the scuffed hardwood floor like a slow exhale, picked up the papers, folded them along their ugly creases with hands that didn't shake. I placed them back inside the envelope, sealed it shut with a single strip of worn tape. No ceremony, no anger, just finality. The air in the house felt heavier than it had a moment ago, pressing down on my chest. I shrugged on my denim jacket, the same one I'd worn to cattle auctions and Sunday services, and 100 early mornings fixing broken fence lines. It felt tighter somehow, like even my own skin didn't quite fit anymore. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the sharp, dry scent of coming rain. The field swayed under it, restless, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I crossed the porch with slow, even steps. The screen door slapped shut behind me, the bang loud. In the stillness, I walked barefoot down the 3 crooked steps, the old wood rough against my soles. My truck sat in the driveway, red dust clinging stubbornly to its fenders. The keys dangled from the ignition. Waiting. I didn't get in. Didn't even reach for the handle. Instead, I leaned back against the hood, arms crossed, eyes tracing the familiar ridges of the land stretching out before me. Golden fields bending under the push of the wind. distant cottonwoods hunching against the horizon, the creek cutting a lazy line through the far pasture, glinting silver in the dying light. This was my home. My blood was in this dirt, my father's sweat, my grandfather's dreams. Now it was Samantha's, at least on paper. Funny, I muttered under my breath, how easy it is to steal a lifetime with a few strokes of ink. I watched a crow drift overhead, wings stretched black against the fading sky. It cried once, harsh and raw, before disappearing beyond the trees. The house behind me groaned as the wind worked its way under the eaves. Every creak sounded like a goodbye. I thought about calling someone, a lawyer, an old friend, anybody, but the weight in my chest told me it was too soon for that, too raw, too much blood still pooling under the skin where the blade had gone in. I needed to sit with it first, feel every inch of the damage, let it scar the way it needed to. Because the thing about betrayal, real betrayal, is that you can't fix it by fighting back too soon. You have to let it burn, let it gut you clean. Only then can you start rebuilding the parts that matter. I stayed there until the sun dropped behind the hills, bleeding orange and red across the sky. Stayed until the stars began to blink awake, cold and distant and utterly indifferent. Only then did I push off the truck, walk back into the house, and turn off every light. One by one, room by room. No words, no prayers, just silence. And in that silence, I made myself another promise. I wasn't going to chase Samantha down. I wasn't going to beg for what was mine. I was going to make her regret ever thinking I'd stay broken, one quiet step at a time. The night settled heavy over the ranch, thick and unmoving like a wool blanket soaked through with rain. I sat alone in the living room, the only light a weak flicker from the dying fire in the stone hearth. The coffee had long gone cold in my hand, but I didn't move to warm it. I didn't need heat. I needed the numbness. And like it always does when everything falls apart, memory crawled in to take the place of anger. I saw her, Samantha, maybe 7, maybe 8 years old, sitting, cross-legged on the barn floor. She had a mouthful of missing teeth and a braid so messy it looked like a crow's nest. I was 12 then, already too big for most things, but never too big for her. She was crying over a kitten she found half frozen by the creek. The little thing wasn't going to make it. Even I could tell that. But she cradled it in her lap anyway, stubborn and shaking. "Promise you won't let it die," she'd said, looking up at me with those wide, wet eyes. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. I just wrapped the kitten in an old feed sack, carried it to the warmth of the house, and sat with her all night while she whispered hope into its ears. It died before morning, but Samantha never blamed me. She'd crawled into my lap instead, tucked her head against my chest and whispered, "You're my hero, Evan. Always." I squeezed my eyes shut against the memory, but it clung to me like a burr. Sharp, relentless. Where did that little girl go? When did she start seeing me as something to be used instead of someone to be trusted? Another memory shoved its way in. Hi, school graduation day. Dad clapped me on the back, pride plain in his rough, sunburned face. Mom cried into a napkin, and Samantha had wrapped her arms around me so tight I thought she'd crack a rib. "You made it," she'd said, smiling like the world was perfect and safe. That same night, she made me swear I'd never leave the ranch for good. "Keep it alive, Evan," she'd said, voice small and serious. "It's our home." And I had. Through droughts, through lean winters, through broken tractors and busted fences and sleepless nights worrying over how to pay the next bill. I had stayed, fought, built, while she chased city lights and careers and cocktails with strangers who wouldn't know. A fence post from a light pole kept it alive. For her. For the memory of all the good things we used to be. And now, she signed it away with a pen stroke as easy as breathing. The fire popped, throwing shadows across the floor. I watched them dance and curl, my mind miles away, buried under the weight of things I couldn't fix. Maybe that was the worst part. Not the land, not the money, not even the betrayal. It was realizing that Samantha had made peace with losing me a long time ago, and I was just the fool still clinging to a version of her that had died somewhere I wasn't looking. Looking back, the cracks had started forming long before the foundation gave way. I just chose not to see them. At first it was small things, missed calls, text messages answered hours late, if at all. Excuses layered over excuses. Work was busy, traffic was bad, she was just too tired. Samantha had always been the one to plan Sunday dinners, to make sure we sat down once a week like family was supposed to. But then she started cancelling. Once, then again. Then it became normal not to see her at all. Next weekend, Evan, I promise. Her voice had sounded light, distracted, like a radio tuned to the wrong station. She stopped asking about the ranch, stopped asking about me. When she did call, she asked questions that didn't land right. Questions about the value of the land, the state of the crops, whether I'd ever thought about moving on to something bigger. At the time, I thought she was just worried about me. Maybe she wanted me to have a better life, one that didn't involve patching fences and fixing tractors at sunrise. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, because that's what you do when you love someone. You fill in the cracks with trust, even when the walls are already starting to sway. The next sign came wrapped in expensive leather. One afternoon she pulled up to the ranch in a brand new BMW, a gleaming black thing that looked like it belonged in a city parking garage, not grinding. Down our dusty back roads, she climbed out, wearing heels that sunk into the dirt and a blazer so sharp it could have cut wire. I remember wiping my hands on a rag, walking over, and grinning like an idiot. "Well, look at you, city slicker," I joked. She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. She handed me a thick manila envelope, said it was routine paperwork, just some things the lawyer needed to update Dad's will, clean up a few technicalities. I didn't read it. I trusted her. I signed where she told me to sign, not thinking twice about it. She hugged me before she left, perfume clinging to my jacket long after her taillights disappeared down the road. And I told myself that was still Samantha, that underneath the new car and the new clothes and the new life, she was still my kid sister. Still the girl who once called me her hero. I didn't want to see that her hugs had grown stiff, that her laughter had hollowed out, that every time she smiled at me now, it felt like she was smiling at a version of me she'd already outgrown. Even the land seemed to know. The pastures grew rougher, the fences sagged a little lower. The barn needed a fresh coat of paint that I kept putting off. It was like the ranch could feel it, the shifting weight of history being rewritten in real time. But I ignored it all, buried myself in work, in chores, in the comforting lies of routine. Because facing the truth would have meant admitting that the one person I thought would always have my back had already turned her face away. The truth didn't break me that day. On the porch when I opened the envelope, the truth had been breaking me piece by piece for years. I was just too stubborn, or too stupid, to feel it happening, until now. Anger is easy. Rage burns hot, fast, reckless. But if you want real revenge, the kind that sticks, the kind that doesn't just hurt but leaves scars, you need patience. And I had patience in spades. The morning after the truth crashed down, on me I woke before dawn like I always had. The house was cold, the floorboards biting against my bare feet. I brewed a pot of coffee in silence, the only sound the slow drip, drip, drip filling the empty kitchen. No slamming doors, no screaming. Into the void. No wild plans fueled by pride and wounded ego. Just steady breathing. Just cold. Hard clarity. The first step was understanding exactly what I was up against. I dug out the file box Dad kept under the bed. Yellowed deeds, insurance papers, bank statements stretching back decades. I flipped through them slowly, carefully, piecing together the bones of the ranch, the legacy Samantha had tried to rip out from under me. I found copies of the original will, not just one, but two. Dad had updated it a year before he passed, making sure the land would stay in my name. Protected. Samantha's paperwork told a different story. I needed proof. I needed leverage. I took pictures of everything, every signature, every stamp, every notarized line of text, and stored them on an old flash drive I hadn't used in years. Next, I drove 40 miles south, where no one knew my name, to meet with a lawyer who specialized in property fraud. A woman named Angela Ross. Sharp eyes, sharper mind. She didn't flinch when I laid out the story. Didn't offer false sympathy either. Just nodded, tapping a red pen against a legal pad. Forgery, misrepresentation, possibly elder financial abuse, depending on when those documents were signed. Her voice was clinical, precise, exactly what I needed. Angela showed me the steps, paper trails to follow, witnesses to track down, financial records to subpoena. It wouldn't be quick, it wouldn't be clean, but it would be thorough. "You don't have to destroy her," Angela said, her pen pausing mid-sentence. "You can walk away, start fresh somewhere else." I met her gaze across the desk, steady, unwavering. "She didn't just steal land," I said quietly. "She stole my name, my blood, my history. You don't walk away from that." Angela just nodded once and went back to writing. I spent the next week moving pieces no one else could see. I opened a new bank account under a different trust name, transferred what little savings I had into it, not enough to make me rich, but enough to keep me afloat if the storm got worse. I rented a small storage unit an hour outside town, moved every important document, every family photo, every scrap of proof out of the house and into that steel box. I changed the locks on the ranch, had the alarm system upgraded, cameras installed under the eaves, motion lights over the fields. Samantha had the paperwork, but I still had the land, and I wasn't about to hand it over easy. Every night, I sat at the kitchen table under the buzz of the old light bulb, mapping out every step, every move she might make, every counter I needed ready. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was about control, about reclaiming what was mine. Not through screaming, not through begging, but through precision, through patience. The way Dad had taught me to mend a broken fence post, measure twice, cut once. I wasn't coming after Samantha with fists. I was coming after her with facts, with truth, with the quiet, merciless weight of inevitability. She just didn't know it yet. But she would. Oh, she would. The thing about betrayal is that it's never as simple as you first think. It's never just one lie, it's a house of cards. Built higher and higher, each layer thinner and shakier than the last. And once you start pulling at the edges, the whole damn thing comes crashing down. It was Angela who found the first thread, a title transfer, quiet, buried deep inside the county records office, filed 3 months before my father even passed away. 3 months, which meant Samantha hadn't just stolen from me after Dad died. She'd been scheming while he was still breathing, while he was still sitting at the kitchen table with us, planning spring planting, talking about fixing the north fence line, worrying about next year's taxes, while he trusted us to honor him. I remember staring at the computer screen in Angela's office, the words blurring into a smear of black and white. "She couldn't have," I said, voice low, even though the evidence was staring me in the face. "He would have never—" Angela didn't answer. She didn't need to. I scrolled further. Bank transfers, withdrawals from Dad's account, large ones, disguised as estate planning fees and legal consultation charges, tens of thousands of dollars, siphoned away like water leaking from a cracked pipe. Most of it went to a law firm Samantha had on retainer, a firm specializing in property acquisitions and quiet settlements. She hadn't just forged my signature. She had systematically stripped our father's life's work out from under him before his body was even cold. The final blow came from a security tape Angela somehow got her hands on. Video dated 6 weeks before Dad's death, grainy, black and white, time-stamped. Samantha sitting beside him in the living room, smiling that easy, sweet smile she was so good at, sliding documents across the coffee table while he fumbled for his reading glasses, pointing to places where he needed to sign, helping him, guiding him, pressuring him. It wasn't obvious unless you knew what to look for. The way she tapped the pen, the way she angled the papers just so he wouldn't see, the fine print, the way she kept talking fast and cheerful, never giving him time to really read. It was manipulation dressed up like love, and Dad, trusting her, had signed. Trust had killed him long before cancer ever got the chance. I sat there in Angela's office, fists clenched so tight the knuckles burned, but I didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't even breathe heavy. I just watched the little girl I carried on my shoulders, the teenager I taught to drive a stick shift, the woman I thought I'd walk down the aisle someday, smiling as she gutted us both from the inside out. Somewhere in my chest, something cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet splintering sound, like old wood finally giving way. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking under my weight. She didn't just steal the land, I said finally. She stole him. Angela nodded, said nothing. Because what was there left to say? I wasn't fighting for dirt anymore. I wasn't even fighting for money. I was fighting for the truth. For every handshake, every sunrise, every broken fence post, every promise whispered into the fields under a bleeding Colorado sky. And I would make sure Samantha learned one last lesson. You can forge signatures. You can steal land. You can even bury the past under 1,000 lies, but you can't outrun the truth, not forever. The thing about setting a trap is simple. You don't rush, you don't show your hand. You don't give the prey a reason to run, not until it's too damn late. I let Samantha believe she'd won. I answered her texts with short, polite replies. I agreed to meet when she suggested we talk things through. I smiled when we bumped into each other at the county fairgrounds, tipping my hat like everything was just fine. Inside, I was building a cage around her so tight she wouldn't even see the bars until they snapped shut. Angela and I worked quietly. Behind the scenes, filed motions, gathered affidavits, pulled financial records and deposition statements. Every lie Samantha told, we documented. Every shady transaction, every forged signature, every backroom deal she thought was buried, we dug it up. And the beautiful thing about liars is this: they can't help themselves. Given enough time, enough space, they always hang themselves. So I gave her space, fed her enough rope to tie 1,000 knots. When she called one afternoon, her voice all syrup and guilt, I answered on the second ring. Hey, Ev, she said, been thinking. Maybe we could meet up, talk through all this. Maybe we can figure something out. No lawyers, just family. I agreed, calmed even. Sure, Sam, I'd like that. We set a date, the diner off Route 47, neutral ground. Public enough that she'd feel safe, private enough that she wouldn't realize I wasn't coming alone. Angela arranged for a court officer to be nearby, papers ready, not just for a lawsuit, for criminal charges, fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, the trifecta. The night before the meeting, I walked the fence line one more time, the wind tugging at my jacket, the stars cold and sharp overhead. I wasn't nervous, wasn't angry, wasn't anything. I was hollowed out, like an old tree left standing because no one had bothered to see it was already dead inside. And somehow, that hollow space gave me more strength than rage ever could, because Samantha wasn't just fighting a brother anymore. She was fighting a man who had nothing left to lose and everything left to set right. The next morning, I arrived early, took a booth facing the door, ordered a black coffee and waited. The diner buzzed with low conversation, the clink of forks against plates, the occasional laugh cutting through the static hum of country music on the old jukebox. At 9:15 on the dot, Samantha walked in. She wore a powder blue suit, her makeup flawless, her smile bright and brittle. She spotted me, lifted a hand in a little wave, and crossed the room. I stood as she approached, pulled out her chair like the gentleman Dad had raised me to be. We exchanged pleasantries. She talked. I listened. She spun stories about confusion, about misunderstandings, about how the lawyers must have mixed things up, how family was more important than paperwork, how she never meant to hurt me. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the lies fall from her mouth like sugar cubes into hot water, dissolving the moment they touched the surface. When she paused, waiting for me to jump at the bait, I just smiled. "You're right, Sam," I said quietly. Family is everything, and with that I nodded toward the door. The court officer stepped in, envelope in hand, face blank and professional. Samantha's smile faltered, then froze, then cracked. She looked at the envelope like it might explode in her hands. I stood, dropping a few bills on the table for the coffee, picked up my hat, turned toward the door. Didn't say another word, didn't look back, because there's a kind of justice no courtroom can deliver, a justice born from betrayal and silence and long, slow planning. And Samantha was about to learn sometimes the quietest vengeance cuts the deepest. The thing about truth is, once it's loose, it doesn't crawl. It runs. It crashes through walls. It shatters windows. It burns down everything, built on lies, and Samantha's house of cards didn't stand a chance. 3 days after the meeting at the diner, she was served again, this time by federal marshals, fraud, forgery, wire transfer violations, elder exploitation. Angela moved faster than Samantha could blink. Bank accounts frozen, assets flagged, travel restrictions slapped on without ceremony. Didn't attend the first hearing. Didn't need to. My part was done. The paperwork spoke louder than anything I could have said, but I heard the stories. Samantha showing up to court in the same designer suit she wore to charm county clerks, and bank managers standing pale and tight-lipped as the charges were read out loud. Her lawyer, some city shark she must have burned half her savings to afford, arguing for delays, for dismissals, for mercy. There was no mercy left. The evidence was too clean, too damning. Every fake signature, every stolen dollar, every time she smiled into our father's face while driving the knife deeper into his back. One by one, the lies fell apart under the weight of real proof. And Samantha? She stood there in front of strangers, under the cold fluorescent lights of a courtroom she thought she'd never see from the wrong side, and watched her carefully built kingdom collapse into ash at her feet. No grand speeches, no dramatic breakdowns, just a woman realizing too late that some debts you don't walk away from. I got the call from Angela late one afternoon while I was mending a section of the north fence. The sun was low, painting everything in shades of bruised gold. "It's done," she said simply. They offered her a plea deal. She took it. She's surrendering the land and paying restitution. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, the worn wood of the fence post rough under my other hand. "How long?" I asked. 5 years probation. Heavy financial penalties. Community service. 5 years. Not enough, maybe. Not for what she took, not for what she broke, but it was enough to make sure she couldn't rebuild what she'd destroyed. Angela hesitated before adding, "She wanted me to pass along a message." I said nothing, waited. She said she's sorry. Said she hopes someday you'll understand why she did it. I looked out across the fields, the grass bending under the evening wind, the creek catching the last dying light. Understand? No, I didn't think I ever would, because no amount of desperation, no dream, no ambition could ever excuse putting a price tag on the people who bled for you, who trusted you, who loved you. I ended the call with a quiet thank you, tucked the phone back into my pocket, and finished driving the last nail into the fence post. The fields didn't care about court rulings or restitution payments. The land just needed tending, and I needed the silence. Later that night, I sat on the porch, an old wool blanket draped over my shoulders, a cup of black coffee cooling between my hands. The stars were out in force, sharp and clear. Somewhere in town, Samantha was packing up the wreckage of her life, signing over the deeds, writing checks she couldn't afford to people she thought would never catch her. And me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just empty. And somehow that felt like victory because Samantha could rebuild somewhere else, change her name, pretend none of it had happened, but she would never again set foot on this ranch, never again cross these fields, never again walk this land under her own name, and that, more than anything, was justice. She tried to call. 3 times that week my phone lit up with her number. Each time I let it ring until the screen went dark. There was nothing left to say. No apology that could stitch back what had been torn apart. No explanation that could undo the weight of 1,000 small betrayals. Still, part of me understood why she tried. Some part of her still wanted to believe she could fix it. That blood would cover all sins. But blood doesn't fix broken things. It just stains the ground around them. On the 7th day, an envelope arrived. In the mailbox. No return address. Just my name in handwriting I knew better than my own. Inside was a letter, scrawled on plain notebook paper. Shaky and rushed. She talked about pressure, about dreams she couldn't afford, about debts and desperation, and how she had convinced herself I would understand, would forgive. At the end, in uneven script, she wrote, "You're my brother. You always will be. Please don't hate me." I sat with that letter under the same oak tree, where Dad used to sharpen fence tools on Sunday afternoons. Watched the sun sink low over the fields, bleeding red and gold into the horizon. And for the first time since this whole thing began, I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't feel much of anything at all, just a kind of tired sadness. The kind you feel when you realize a chapter of your life has ended, not with fireworks or slammed doors, but with a slow, steady fading. Folded the letter once, then again, and tucked it back into the envelope. Walked it down to the burn barrel by the barn. I lit a match, dropped it onto the paper, watched it catch and curl and blacken. The flames licking up into the evening air. I didn't say anything. Didn't make a speech to the smoke or the stars. I just stood there, hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets, and let the past burn down to ash. When the last scrap of paper was gone, I turned away. Samantha was my sister. She would always be my sister. But from this day forward, she would be just a name, just a chapter closed. No more phone calls, no more letters, no more trying to patch a bridge she had already burned beyond saving. Some things, once broken, are better left that way. I walked back to the house, the night, cool against my face, the gravel crunching under my boots. The porch light glowed warm and steady, the only beacon I needed. Inside, the house smelled like wood smoke and fresh coffee. Home. I poured a cup, leaned against the kitchen counter, and stared out the window at the wide-open dark. The ranch was quiet tonight. Still. Mine again. No noise. No lies. No ghosts whispering promises they couldn't keep. Just the honest kind of silence that comes after a hard fight is over. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not because I won, not because she lost, but because I was free. And sometimes freedom is the only revenge you'll ever need. Spring came late that year. The winter had been a hard one. Bone dry, winds sharp enough to peel the paint off. The barn. But one morning, just as the frost finally gave up its grip on the ground, the first green shoots pushed their way through the dead grass. Small. Stubborn. Alive. I stood at the edge of the field, hands on my hips, breathing in the clean, cold air, the kind of air that smells like beginnings. The ranch wasn't what it used to be. Too many fences still sagged. Too many fields needed reseeding. The barn roof still carried a half-finished patch I hadn't found the heart to fix last fall, but it was mine. Every broken slat, every battered gate, every stubborn inch of dirt. Mine. I spent the mornings fixing what I could, driving nails into warped boards, mending wire, relearning the land. Like shaking hands with an old friend who had never really left. Just waited, patient and steady, for me to come back. In the afternoons, I'd sit on the porch with a book or a guitar, letting the sun sink slow and gold over the fields. No noise but the wind and the creak of the rocking chair under me. Sometimes the loneliness pressed heavy against my ribs, an ache where a family used to be. But most days, it felt like breathing easier after carrying a weight you forgot you were holding. One Saturday, while repairing a broken section of fence near the creek, I found something half buried in the mud, an old horseshoe, rusted and bent. I brushed the dirt off, thumb tracing the worn iron. Dad always said finding a horseshoe meant luck, that you had to hang it open side up to catch all the good things trying to fall in. I took it back to the house, cleaned it with a wire brush, and nailed it above the front door, open side up. Not because I believed luck would save me, but because I knew now, luck never saves you. Work does. Forgiveness does. Starting over does. A few weeks later, a stray dog wandered onto the property. Thin, skittish, ribs sharp under a coat of dirt and matted fur. It took 3 days and half a bag of jerky to coax him close enough to touch. Another week before he trusted me enough to step inside the house. Named him Chance, because sometimes that's all you get. One small chance to rebuild, one stubborn chance to start again. Chance followed me everywhere after that. Down the fence lines, into town, across the fields at dusk when the sky burned itself, out in shades of violet and blood. Some nights, sitting on the porch with Chance's head heavy against my knee, I'd look out at the land and feel something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, not because the scars were gone, but because I was still, here, still standing, still building something real out of the wreckage, and that was enough. It would always be enough. Because sometimes, the best kind of revenge isn't about tearing someone else down. It's about living so damn well they disappear behind you, like a bad dream you don't even remember waking from. And in the wide, quiet stretch of my life that followed, Samantha became just that. A bad dream. Faded, forgotten, gone. I had work to do, a home to tend, a life to live. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was free to live it, on my terms, in my own name, on my own land, under a sky too big for regrets. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Sometimes, betrayal cuts deepest not from enemies but from the people we once trusted with everything. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't loud. It's the quiet, steady act of rebuilding yourself stronger than before. What about you? Have you ever experienced a betrayal that changed you forever? Do you believe forgiveness is always necessary? Or are there some lines that should never be crossed? If you were in Evan's place, would you have handled it differently? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your stories, your opinions, they matter. And as always, thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, stay strong, stay true.